All around the world, migratory birds seek the same conditions: abundant food and safe habitats. Kinmen Island, located along the southern coast of China, has broad areas of estuaries with minimal human disturbance. Situated along the migratory path, it is an ideal stopover or wintering location for many migratory birds. As the northern winds gather force, the cormorants embark on their journey like all other migratory birds. Taking advantage of the seasonal gales, they migrate southwards to the wintering grounds. The cormorants travel in groups, and their orderly flight is reminiscent of geese. Around December, flocks of cormorants leave the Ussuri River region in Siberia and the northeast region of China, flying southwards to gather at Lake Tzu in Kinmen. The number of birds reaches its peak around January, when close to 10,000 cormorants appear, making Kinmen one of the largest wintering grounds of the cormorants in the world. The cormorants found in Kinmen are widely distributed around the world. They belong to the subspecies sinensis, which is abundant in China. It is also known as the great cormorant or the common cormorant. The plumage of the cormorant is entirely black. This large water bird has a wingspan of about 100 centimeters and weighs about 2 kilograms. To successfully capture fish by surface diving, cormorants are equipped with webbed feet, feathers that are partially wettable to avoid buoyancy, and strong bills. A cormorant can easily swallow its prey thanks to its expandable gular pouch on its throat. When it gets really hot, the throat pouch serves to regulate body temperature as well. Because it has to dive deep into the waters for fish, the cormorant is heavier than most birds. To take off in flight, it has to gather momentum by running on the water first before taking off. The cormorants love to line up and follow each other in flight. That's because the ones in front provide much welcomed uprising currents for the followers in their flight. The cormorants have short and strong wings, suitable for powerful and rhythmic flapping. Sometimes they glide. Although cormorants are heavy, they can fly quite fast, reaching a speed of 80 kilometers per hour. Cormorants are very social birds. The casuarina trees along quiet water banks of Lake Tzu provide a perfect roosting spot for these gregarious birds. The lake, with the trees as a natural barrier, beckons to the cormorants to spend their winter months there year after year. Roosting communally has its advantages. Besides providing protection from predators, it also helps promote synchronized mating. Cormorants are highly loyal to their roosting spots. They roost on the same trees every night, landing accurately on the branches. As much as they like to be in each other's company, the cormorants are quite territorial. They settle quite close to one another, and scuffles are inevitable as they quarrel over favored spots. Their beaks serve as their main weapon. On a cold winter morning, the chill cuts through the air like a blade. The cormorants, with their necks tucked in during the night, awaken to the warmth of the sun as it slowly rises. Before they leave their roosting places, the cormorants stretch and give their wings a vigorous workout, as an athlete performing his warm-up exercises before a race. A buzzard glides over the casuarina trees, creating a disturbance. Birds of prey rarely attack cormorants, but the cormorants take the threat seriously. Fish are the main source of food for the birds. They take off to the sea daily to feed. Feeding times are not rigid. Usually, the birds flock to the sea between 7 and 10 in the morning. Before they leave, the cormorants gather and flock above the roosting place, making a tight formation, and then travel together to the feeding grounds. The cormorants move in long, wavy formations. Spreading out in flight gives the cormorants a better chance in spotting fish. Cormorants are team players when it comes to feeding. They join forces to create a conveyor belt-like formation, taking turns to plunge into the water to herd the fish together for easy feeding. Most of the time, the cormorants forage in shallow waters. They can dive up to several meters underwater for 20 to 30 seconds, preying on shoals of smaller fish. A cormorant needs approximately 300 grams of food daily. The intake is quite substantial, but group fishing is highly efficient. It does not take long for the birds to satisfy their appetites. Research shows that 90% of the wintering cormorants in Kinmen forage in the sea. Only a handful of them stay inland to fish in lakes and ponds. These birds fish in small groups, herding the fish into a corner of the pond before diving into the water to feed on them. A cormorant with a fish in its mouth is often a tempting target for the other birds. The successful bird adjusts the angle of its catch rapidly and swallows it. This goes to show the cooperative yet competitive behavior of the birds. Sometimes the cormorant forages on its own. A lone cormorant usually feeds in fresh waters inland. The cormorant's amazing ability to fish is no secret. For thousands of years, the people in Yunnan, Guangdong, Guangxi, and Hunan areas have been known to rear cormorants and train them to fish. The locals call the cormorants fish eagles. Fish are a major source of food to many other species of birds in Kinmen as well. Fishing tactics and physical forms differ. Herons and egrets are tall with long necks. They like to poke around the pond or along the banks searching for fish. The black stork is highly efficient as well. It uses its bill to chase fish out of their hiding places and then proceeds to capture its prey. The great crested grebe employs fishing techniques that are similar to the cormorant. They pursue their prey underwater. The osprey is a bird of prey of considerable size. Its strong claws and great speed enable it to capture fish close to the surface of the water. These birds may vary in physical forms and fishing techniques, but together they represent a vital link, the link between the resources of a habitat and survival. Unlike most diving water birds, cormorants spend very little time in water. They choose to rest on land rather than in water. After their meals, cormorants will fly to a quiet sandbank or to trees to take a rest and spread their wings. Wing spreading is a unique trait of the cormorant. They can maintain the wing spread position for long periods of time. They do this to dry their wings or to regulate their body temperature. Some studies show that spreading wings could be a sign of successful fishing. As the evening draws close, the cormorants conduct their second round of group feeding. They congregate above the water like a vast net, taking turns to dive and feed. This would be their final meal before they return to roost. Returning with full stomachs, they stop by the sandbanks and inland waters briefly before trooping back to the night roost. Their flights take on various formations as they fly, numbering in dozens, sometimes hundreds. Waves after waves of cormorants return. When the cormorants come back to roost, they are always against the winds. So the birds cruise to the rhythm of the winds, changing formations as they fly. They flap their wings or glide accordingly. There is coordination in the seemingly ever-changing dance. When it gets windy, the cormorants who have returned from their feeding ventures gather on the lake for a few leisurely moments. The birds play out numerous roles in the changing lights of the sky and altering weather. By mid-February, whilst the cold winter gales still carry on, the cormorants discreetly don their breeding plumage. White silky feathers appear on the bird's head and neck. The white patches on the thighs slowly emerge, and the plumage on the whole turns glossy metallic. The cormorant is getting ready for its breeding season in spring. Both the gradually warming climate and breeding instinct trigger the urge to return to the north. By March, the cormorants start to leave their wintering grounds in batches, and the numbers in Kinmen dwindle. This may be an indication that the wintering populations in Kinmen are from different breeding grounds. Cormorants are by nature cautious birds. They select small deserted islands, cliffs, or wetland vegetation as breeding grounds. These locations offer minimal intrusion from both humans and predators. During mating, the cormorants engage in a series of displays to attract their mates. A displaying bird will stand in a conspicuous spot, raising and lowering its wings to expose the white patches on its thighs. It will also throw its head backwards and forwards, accompanied by low guttural sounds. A willing male will hop around its intended mate, putting up its crown feathers as well. A female will spread its tail feathers to acknowledge its willingness to mate. Mating may seem easy, but it is actually quite a feat to accomplish. It is certainly not an easy task for the male to balance itself on the smooth feathers while it tries to mate. Most birds have to flap their wings to maintain their balances. The cormorant, being a large bird, usually hops directly onto the back of the female bird to proceed with mating. During mating, it maintains its delicate balance by clutching at the female with its bill. Sometimes, the male cormorant will stand on the back of the female bird and not mate. It is simply expressing its claim on its mate. In order to ensure all eggs are fertilized, The mating behavior will go on until the last egg has been laid. The building of the nest commences with the mating. The male bird looks for materials, while the female bird builds the nest and incubates the eggs. Nesting materials are not easy to come by. Some cormorants resort to pinching from other nests. The nest is simply built with sticks and held together by excrement. Soft, dried grass is put in the middle of the nest. The eggs are pale green in color, and clutch sizes vary from 2 to 5 eggs, all with a good chance of hatching. Because of its need to dive and fish, the skin of the cormorant is properly insulated. This explains why the cormorants use their feet instead of their bellies to keep the eggs warm. By mid-April, the quiet breeding grounds are astir with excitement. After 28 days of incubation, the nestlings break out of their eggs and venture unsteadily from under the parents. The nestlings must be kept warm to survive. The parents' warm feathers provide them with essential protection. After 4 or 5 days, the nestlings open their eyes for the first time. They scramble for food from their parents and slowly become familiar with their surroundings. When it comes to feeding the youngsters, the cormorants are not so different from the herons. They feed the nestlings with regurgitated fish. This helps the parents to conserve their energy and frees up more time for them to keep an eye on their young. The weather becomes warmer by May. The entire breeding ground is filled with the sounds of fledglings begging for food. The parents work even harder to satisfy the appetites of the ever-hungry youngsters. One of the parents has to stay and look after the still vulnerable offspring, while the other parent hurries off to forage for food. Parenting is definitely not an easy task. The parents gradually lose the shine of their breeding plumage. By the time they are 1.5 months old, the chicks have developed their plumage and have learned to preen their feathers. Sometimes they can be quite aggressive. After 2 months of intensive feeding, the babies are almost as big as their parents. Every time a parent returns, the fledglings stretch their necks and open their mouths to beg for food. The parent tries to distribute food fairly, but more often than not, it is overwhelmed by the insistent and demanding chicks. By July, most of the fledglings have adopted the appearance of adolescence. The noise level reaches a new height in the breeding ground. Young birds crowd the place, performing chases and defending their territories. Three months in a nest is more than a bird can bear. The fledglings are no longer contented to stay in the nests. They venture out and flap their wings vigorously in their eager attempts to take flight. With the help of the lifting wind, the adolescents take off for the first time effortlessly. The youngsters are already adept swimmers. No swimming lessons are necessary. But of course, they are still unable to hunt for their own fish. At this stage, the parents will keep on feeding the young birds until they have learned to fish. November arrives with the northeast winds. The cormorants once again fly southwards with their young to return to their wintering grounds. The annual migration happens like clockwork without fail year after year. These dances performed by the cormorants in the skies are vibrant and poetic. They signify the vitality of our land, and it is through them that the beauty of nature is manifested. They open our eyes to the wonders of the wild. Whether or not this enchanting image will last depends entirely on our wisdom and on the choices we make.